Parallel Planets podcast.
Welcome to the Parallel Planets podcast. I'm here with Mike Benbough-Jackson. Mike, for those people who don't know you, maybe you could just tell us a bit about who you are, what you do, and what it is that motivates you.
Well, that last one's going to be tricky, but I can certainly say who I am to begin with. Nice,
Thank you.
easy, softball to begin with.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a senior lecturer in history at Liverpool John Moores University. I'm a modern historian, dealing with history mainly from the mid 18th century onwards, thereabouts. I've worked in the field of history ever since I can remember. I've decided to take it as my career choice because, well, there's not many other things that I could do, and best to do something I was interested in. And as well as dealing with strange matters, I've always been interested in that in historical sense. I've also dealt a lot with all kinds of other historical issues, political, social, and some other cultural matters too.
So you, oh, go on. Sorry,
Oh,
you go.
sorry, I forgot that about the motivation bit.
Yeah,
I
yeah, go on.
talked
Yeah.
myself out of that one. Yeah. What motivates me? Well, I think the issue of history is inquiry and what's out there and what we don't know. And even though there are many things that we'll never know, there are enough clues and traces around the place, I think, to deserve a lot of our time looking for it. So that's what gets me going.
Thank you. So was it? So you started off. You went straight into university, and you came out as a lecturer. Did you from university?
Oh,
Uh,
yeah, it's a bit longer than that. A bit of
yeah.
a in and out a bit. Early 90s weren't a good time economically.
Yeah, sure. What I'm interested in is, was it the were you already interested in the world of the strange, or was it something that you found within history and politics, etc., that led you down that path as well?
Well, to be honest, that's a good question because I think what I've been finding has reinforced what was already long time been there, long standing. And I was thinking about this before going on air, wondering about, when did it actually start? And I can trace it back to age of 4, maybe, even thereabouts. Imaginary friends. I was convinced I saw a pterodactyl at about the age of 5.
Right.
Looking back at it, it was probably a heron. But I knew more about pterodactyls than herons at that age because they were obviously obsessed with dinosaurs. So
Yeah, yeah,
I
I
think,
was. Yeah.
yeah, I think the sense of wonder is definitely from there and perhaps even earlier, but I can't remember.
So yeah, so that sort of feeds into the next question. Obviously, I ask a lot of people. Did you grow up with a family influenced by those sorts of interests, or were there certain situations that happened that you can explain that, or etc. etc.? I know that's the case for me. That's why I'm fascinated. I had a strange experience when I was 2, but was it a similar thing for you? Or obviously the pterodactyl, etc.
Yeah, I mean, never forget that. I can see it now almost. I almost want to go back to the house to see, the window that I saw it out of.
Tell me
Yeah.
about that then, as it's come up. Tell me about the pterodactyl.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I've got more memory of that than almost anything else. I got some memories of that. I was living in Gloucester at the time, and yeah, it was just. I just remember looking out of a square with a white, cloud, and there it was, like gliding over there. And I knew my dinosaurs, and that was a pterodactyl for me. And I can see now the outline of it, the dark outline.
Hmm.
But I say probably a heron. We had like a marshland kind of area to the side of us and so forth. So I don't think it was a who knows. But about the family, it's very interesting because it wasn't something that was explicitly part of my upbringing, but it was there in spades when you think about it, when I think about it on both sides. My dad was often quite scared to talk about it, and I understand why, because he came from a family in Lancashire where there were a few spiritualists, and apparently his auntie could produce ectoplasm on demand.
Oh wow.
Now, if I'd grown up in a house like that, I'd be pretty terrified to talk about it much.
Yeah.
But before he died, which was a few years ago now, but he started reading people's palms in pubs, which he'd never done before. So I think he might have been a bit more inclined. My mother's side is far more on the outside, and she came from southwest Wales, long tradition family, then a rural area, farming as well, area. Uh, my mum reads tarot cards, or she used to read them quite often. She saw a ghost of a brother, a young brother who died an untimely death.
Oh.
My grandmother on my mother's side was she almost looked like the witch from Charlton and the Wheelies, and
Oh
that's probably
wow.
before your time, but
No, I'm
if you
aware of it. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and she was a lovely person, but there was something kind of, again, as a child you kind of do make these things up a bit, but you do almost feel it too. She lived in a cottage, and yeah, so I did get quite a lot from my mother's side and a little bit from my father's side, I think, of interest into this area. Because sometimes you get interested even if you've got a parent who's a bit uneasy with it, because you think, oh, why are they uneasy with it? When
Mm.
my dad was in the army, my dad was military police. He worked in all kinds of like quite up there jobs. He was a nurse in Rampton, high security hospital,
Right.
and but still he wouldn't like to talk about anything like that.
Yeah, of
And it took me
course.
a
Yeah.
while to work out why.
It
Yeah.
is. You are right though. There with the sometimes if someone in your family's averse to talking about those things, it makes you more interested, piques your interest, doesn't it? I do. I've known a couple of people who grew up with parents who were. I knew someone whose dad was a psychic, and his mum was into similar sorts of stuff, and but he had no interest in the subject at all, their son. And I think maybe because he was always surrounded by it, and they were very open and honest about it, maybe that was why, perhaps in that
Mm.
situation. But as you say, if one of your parents is a bit uneasy about talking about it, yeah, well, as a child, you're going to be inquisitive, aren't you?
Yeah, and added to my father, there's my mother who never, ever, despite my repeated requests when I was younger, read my tarot. She always stayed away from doing that, and that really gave it an
Oh.
allure then, which obviously drew me in a little bit further than would have happened otherwise, I suppose.
Yeah, I suppose
Yeah.
maybe there is an unwritten rule that you don't read your own child's tarot. Maybe I'm not
Yeah,
sure. Yeah.
yeah. I think there's something like that out there. That there's other rule as well, like not to buy your own pack and so forth, and some people
I
abide
didn't
by
know that
them, some
actually.
don't. Yeah, it's
So it has to
I've
be
broken
gifted
that
to
one.
you.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, right. I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, well.
Even though when you hear lots of practitioners today, like they don't take much note of it, but it still is out there. It's quite a strong thing. And I admit, when I bought one for myself not so long ago at a charity shop, I felt like I was doing something wrong. But it was for charity, so yeah.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. Yeah, because I've been considering buying a pack, but I won't now. I'm going to wait for someone to send one to me or something. Sounds a lot nicer. Maybe a
Good.
nice themed pack or something. I don't know. We'll see.
Oh, yeah. There's so much out there now. It's amazing.
Yeah. So as I've said to some people on previous episodes of this show, just because I'm interested in the world of the strange doesn't mean I believe everything. And a lot of my friends will probably be yawning now because I say that a lot because people will hear me listening to a podcast or see me reading 14 Times or a book about the subjects or whatever.
Mm.
And people will often say, "No, I'm calling nonsense on this. This is rubbish," And I go, "Look, I'm just interested in the subjects,
Mhm.
and it doesn't mean that I believe everything." Um,
Yeah.
and I had a chap called Neil Nixon on last week, and he was saying about how he's not a massive fan of this new theme now in media where they tend to have uh, a skeptic and a believer.
Mhm.
But they don't have any kind of middle ground, like the Fortean
No.
approach, I suppose it would be to some people,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. And I just wondered if how that might feed into some of the cases that you look into and
Mm.
research. Like, do you have a certain method every time, or
Mm.
what have we got to say to that,
Mm.
basically?
Yeah, that's a really good observation there about this tendency to binarize everything and have like black and white camps. I mean, we need to get over that. But again, media kind of prefers that simplicity, don't they? And then
Yes.
they can always meet in the middle and have a resolution or something. But it's always more complicated than that. I mean, it's and the Fortean approach is far more appropriate. I personally have very few experiences, and I'm a believer, and this feeds into how I go about my work, that even if it is completely fabricated or just a product of fear or misidentification, it still is invaluable evidence of humans, we study I study humanities, and it's about studying humans as much as anything else. And if there is something beyond the human realm of perception, then all the better. But it doesn't really matter to me. I like to think about our creative abilities and also what it can tell us about us as people in different circumstances and at different times. So
So,
that's the way I approach it. Yeah.
so I suppose that's with your history background, you're maybe looking at it as more historical
Mm.
human level, as you say, humanities, almost
Mm.
maybe even anthropological in some ways as well. There, I'd say. Well,
Spot on. Yeah, we are very, very indebted to cultural anthropologists and also just yeah, the study of human sciences as they call it in the continent, or used to anyway. It's not so much a scientific method, but just psychology, the sociology, the those factors all important. They're all together.
so are you working a lot at the moment, lecturing as well with on the strange as well as the regular stuff as well. You've got a lot on at the moment.
Yeah, I we're in the middle of marking now. We're coming towards the end. We've got
Yeah.
our own marking deadline. But yes, I do teach a second year module on the supernatural in a British context, modern context.
Oh wow.
Which is regarded as quite unusual at universities. So far I've
Yeah.
heard. I know there are examples in the southwest of England, quite a few
Oh
appropriately,
there.
but I don't know of many others. One's more to specialise in kind of like Owen Davies's work and witchcraft and so forth, and down Exeter way as well,
Yeah.
and of course Ronald Hutton and so forth. But no, mine's quite broad because I also bring in things which aren't strictly supernatural in many people's beliefs, like UFOs, the flying
Yes.
saucer, UAP thing. I'm very keen on that, and also kind of cryptid elements. So it is quite more Fortean than anything else. I mean, I haven't got to balls of frogs and things yet with them, but I might well push that in, in the next year. Yeah.
Yeah, how would you define supernatural if you were
Oh.
to say, I don't know, give some examples that because
Mm.
obviously uh, people who aren't geeks like me uh,
Mm.
might just assume that might find it unusual that you said things that aren't quite supernatural and then said
Mm.
UFOs. I think some people who aren't necessarily into the subject probably would lump UFOs and cryptozoology, cryptids into
Mm.
supernatural. So how would
Yeah.
you define supernatural specifically, if you can?
Oh. I tell my students the first thing, I'm not happy with this title for the module. I chose it, but it just
Ah,
had to do. It was the kind of shorthand of the time, really, to give people the message across. But I think the supernatural things, like typically, like apex supernatural, you say ghosts.
hmm,
I think that would be like kind of fun. And then maybe coming in there, the kind of demonic things, fairies,
yeah.
fae folk, kind of supernatural, and then you kind of in these kind of overlapping territories, and then these questionable things, which of course you look like someone like Merrily Harper's work on strange cats. That's taking a very
Oh,
supernatural take on it. Yeah,
what's that? ABCs sort of thing.
yeah,
What's her
yeah.
name? I'll jot that down.
Oh, she just recently died. Merrily
Oh,
Harper.
Beverly Harper.
Yeah, and her brother. Also Harper, Daemonic Realities. I can't
Okay.
remember his first name now. Go blank. But that's an incredible book as well. They're a great sibling pair on the supernatural,
Okay.
intelligent perspectives, and but her interpretation is so good. The students often lose me with this part. But still, nonetheless, I always try think about the relationship between the yin and yang, in which there's a kind of the cats represent a balance to the yang and so forth, the masculine energy of humanity, and
Oh, wow.
that's why they're seen near railroads and so forth. It's a very very mystical interpretation of that phenomena.
That's interesting. Yeah, because I tend yeah, that's one of the subjects within the world of the strange that I have got a particular interest in is
Mm,
ABCs or alien big cats. But
yeah.
I've always just assumed that they are
Mm,
escapees, escaped
yeah.
from
Uh,
collections and stuff, because there
mm,
will be people who do have illegal collections
oh,
of these things.
yeah.
But then, yeah, that's the first time I've ever heard that mentioned in a more mystical way.
Mm,
And I suppose that kind of feeds as well. I'm just sort of verbalizing my thoughts here, but that also
mm,
sort of feeds into I'm increasingly seeing instances where experts or people with an interest describe Bigfoot sightings as
mm,
perhaps other dimensional um,
mm.
and crossing over from a different dimension. Um,
Yes. That's fascinating. Yeah.
yeah, and the other thing is how I'm increasingly seeing how people are summarizing fairies and alien sightings in the same context as well. What you've
Yeah.
got to say to that? Sorry, that was a bit of a
Oh.
ramble.
Oof, no, there's at least three or four things there yeah, it's amazing. It's this kind of sometimes we split things, sometimes we lump things. That's always that kind of
Mm.
like all academics do that in their field. We all do in our lives as well. What we put together, when we separate them. I think the Bigfoot thing, like Joshua McCutcheon's work and so forth, and many others, it
Yeah.
really is out. There was a documentary very recently as well, which looked at it in two different ways.
Oh,
One
was
thing
it?
that worries me, yeah, one thing that worries me about that though, Kit, is that it's like a get out of jail clause, isn't it? Sometimes when we start saying, "Oh, it's paranormal," to
Yeah.
give an associated word, even though I'm all for it in many ways. But I think when you think, "Well, there's no dead body yet, so it must be paranormal," and you can just imagine skeptically minded people going, "Oh, yeah, yeah." So you can, how can we prove that? And it's like a get out of jail card. However, I do think, we can't rule out that possibility, because if ghosts have a presence, and if we even accept to some extent, then why not something a little bit even stranger, in that respect? I mean,
Yeah.
the forest poltergeist definition of Bigfoot's interesting, because we may as well call it. Why couldn't it be a ghost? I mean, it's the categories that I'm fascinated in, the categories we bring to the supernatural as well, because all these things, ghosts, and the words we use, paranormal, supernatural, preternatural, whatever, they're all efforts to understand something, aren't they? And
Mm.
sometimes you have to like adjust them together. And the fairy alien thing has always struck me, because you've got a group of beings, haven't you? A group of them that mess with us in some way, and maybe good, maybe bad, ambiguous in between. And yeah, the way they take the features of different times, and the like, it's there's something there in terms of how we're thinking about something, even if there's nothing, definitely out there.
Oh yeah, I think there's definitely a sort of quasi connection that spans across these things, and it recently occurred to me how I'm not aware of there really being any reported fairy sightings in the UK
Oh,
in my lifetime, certainly. Uh,
there's no big deal about them, kids. No, but
no,
Simon Young does this. He's a British academic in Italy. He does
yeah.
this. He does this fairy census every so often, and people
Oh,
do report them. However, like you, I wouldn't have been aware of that if it wasn't for that fairy census, because it's not something
no.
that people really talk about much, and it's not on the newspapers as much as, say, a strange, sight in the sky or something would be, light.
Well, yeah, yeah. If someone saw uh, what they would call an extraterrestrial being now, I
Yeah,
suppose. Yeah, that's more likely to get into the newspapers
it is.
instead of a
Yeah,
fairy. But then you get
fairy.
like the crossovers, the sightings that kind of tick both. I'm thinking of the mince pie Martians sighting. You know that one, yeah,
Oh yeah.
classic, isn't it? Yeah.
That's unusual, yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And the Isle of Wight kind of clown
oh,
figure, can't
Sandown
remember his name
Sam,
now.
yeah,
Yeah,
marvelous.
I know. I
Yeah.
mean, if he is a legend. Yeah, the peculiarity, the high strangeness is I love that phrase. I mean, maybe I overuse it a bit too much, because I think there's so much strange on a medium level and a
Yeah.
low level. We need to go high and then ultra strange sometimes to like categorize these peculiar things.
Oh, for sure, yeah. Are there any major sort of cases that pop out for you that you sort of hold close to your heart, so to speak, that are personal favorites? I'm a big Sandown Sam guy, to
Oh,
be honest, but
well, yeah, yeah. I mean, if I had to do fancy dress, I would do him. I might go
yeah,
and dress up as him one day.
probably be quite hard to put it together as well. He had quite the style, that guy.
Yeah, it's like mad jester come kind of. Oh, yeah,
Park your
yeah.
floating shed outside as well before you go in.
This is it. Yeah, massive, like a TARDIS, like kind of going there, massive. There are quite a few cases quite close to where I spent most of my life in South, North Carmarthenshire, near the border of Ceredigion in West Wales. Uh, it wasn't much of a, people didn't talk about things much, even though the Brach of a Beast, which is like a large cat supposed thing, was nearby.
Oh yeah.
And there's this in that area, there's a supposed, like, how can you describe it, a kind of a route that is suggested is taken by these creatures as they move different seasons of the year. So that's fascinating. But as far as the strangest things go, I mean, there's so many weird little things. It's the Liverpool leprechauns, which I've
Mm,
looked into quite a bit. I think they're very
yeah.
close to my heart as as having moved up to this area, and then started looking into them a bit more.
Mm. Well, yeah, half my family are from the Wirral,
All right.
My dad was born in Liverpool, and that's why, unfortunately, I
Oh
follow
no,
Everton.
stick by them. Stick
Oh
by
yeah,
them.
of
Stick
course,
by
yeah.
them.
You know, you
I'm
never
not.
lose. Yeah.
Yeah.
But some we used to spend quite a lot of time in Chester, but quite a lot of there were quite a lot of people that we'd cross paths with who were from North Wales, especially, and it always struck me how there is a really strong folklore
Mm.
in Wales, covering beasts and dragons
Yeah.
and all those sorts of things. It really is interesting to me how there seems to be. I don't. You may disagree, but and I've not been to Wales a huge amount, but it seems to me that the Welsh seem very proud of that folklore, whereas I find sometimes in England people can
Mm.
tend to laugh it off a little bit. I
Mm.
don't know what you've got to
Yeah.
say to that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a very perceptive point, really. Yes, I think it's definitely been the case, at least since the 1930s, from what I've heard about, when family members used to name their children after characters from the Mabinogion instead of religious figures. There's been a supposedly a change in first name attribution. Not that every child was named after the Mabinogion, but there was a little increase there among some families.
Yes.
And I think that's the grand, because the Welsh had a troubled relationship with their mysterious past, and with Methodism and nonconformity, and well, Protestantism is kind of like, generally squeezed it out, but not destroyed it. And we're not like the Irish, really. We're quite lucky because Catholicism's a little bit more forgiving on that front. But we really pushed it on it. But then it's still there, and it's definitely come back in the light of perhaps a more secular society. Some of the students I have from Wales are often very interested. So you're spot on there, Kit, with that. Very interested.
Thank you. So, what are you working on at the moment? What's on the agenda? What's coming up?
Oh, well, well, too many things actually.
Oh, okay.
Too many things. I'm very much I'm a scatter around, but I've just finished putting something together. I've been working on sea serpents in the interwar years in Britain
Oh,
and
wow.
Ireland a little bit. Yeah, I'm not a cryptozoology kind of person, but I've found that the reports in the press that stand out for me involve strange, hairy humanoid figures or these seaside monsters. So there's the thing I've been working on. But I've also got a ghost case on the go from the 1830s in Wolverton and Milton Keynes now, in that area. So those are kind of two things that are running together, competing for my attention, but both near completion. So that's good to move on
Is there
with each of
is
those.
right? Okay. Is there quite a varied history about regarding sea serpents around the British Isles then?
Well, I'm not a, well, I teach modern history. The interwar period is one area that we were taught a lot about it at university. Obviously, strikes, 926 general strike, and
Yeah.
so forth. Um, but when I look at the sea monster side of things, I see all kinds of interesting. I mean, Nessie makes an appearance then as well, and feeds into the sea serpent tradition. So you've got that going on. But before Loch Ness Monster, we have these lots of people by the seaside in the interwar years, and therefore I think we have this greater interest in, because there have always been sea serpent reports,
Mm.
but they increase with increased seaside, well, the popularity and the availability of the seaside as a resort. There's some fascinating sites there, Kate. Honestly, some weird stuff, really weird stuff that I did like Google Maps and was plotting things on it that I was reading about in the newspapers. And honestly, some of the things give me nightmares. Some of the quite
Really?
ordinary things, like about sharks and octopus and things and
Yeah.
jellyfish. But I also know them because they can kind of like merge with it, and they were described as monsters. But some of the things are they're going up rivers, and they are they're kind of dinosaur-like. Very often, people are influenced by the plesiosaur kind of image,
Yeah.
but there's a speedy element to them, and it makes me think whether they were mistaken for speedboats, which were quite common at the time. But even then, I don't know. These are people saying they're moving at 100 miles an hour, or 60
Oh, wow.
miles an hour, or 40 miles an hour, and all of that strikes me. I'm not that aware of things that moving at that speed, and that speed of movement was struck the commentators in the interwar years a lot. So it's not so much people being snatched, even though there's one weird case of a guy dying at Hornsea in Yorkshire.
Mm.
That's a very peculiar case. School teacher, 30-year-old man.
Yeah.
Quite detailed report too. So there's lots of things coming together there, Kit. I'm trying to pull out the themes and relate it to the bigger concerns of the time, because of course it was a rather tense time with what was going on
Yeah,
geopolitically, particularly in the 30s.
of course.
Yeah.
So are there some you sort of alluded to it a bit there, and obviously, you don't have to divulge this if you want to save it for the publishing of your work, but are there some cases that where the individuals appear to have been killed by sea serpents?
Yes, I
Right.
think this would be, well, buy something strange. A powerful fish is my favorite quote, which makes me
Ah,
think of like a deadly halibut or something coming across and
yeah,
taking this
yeah.
guy out. But yeah, it's one of those things that, because the context I'm writing in is like for an academic journal, so I'm not really digging into that as much as I like to. So that's definitely something I can look into in more detail as like a mystery case, really, a mysterious death from 1922. It really is. I mean, it really encourages me to think more about what kind of physical damage that can be done to an individual. Haven't come across anything like it in the interwar years. I've come
Wow.
across weird, peculiar incidents happening and people being stung or seeing something, but
Mm,
this was peculiar, and it makes me think, well, could possibly have been maybe human involved in murdering the individual, but there were so many detailed descriptions of the wounds, and you had experts from the Department of Fisheries talking and everything about this. Yeah, it really is a mystery that I want to get stuck into at some time, and or somebody else pop into it before me, because I just want to know a bit more about this.
yeah. It's the
Very
first
weird
I've heard
case.
of this, actually. Yeah. How
Well,
fascinating.
it's funny because later on in the 20 years later or 25 years later in the 30s, there are quite a few sightings off that east coast. And that east coast, I know, I keep on forgetting. Truth Proof is the name of the book. Oh, I can't remember
Okay.
his name. He's such a
That's all right. I'll
good,
write that down. I'll look it
yeah,
up.
Truth Proof. He appeared on The Unexplained with Howard Hughes a lot.
Okay. Yeah, I probably heard him
Amazing.
then. Yeah.
Bridlington, that area. And it made me think about that zone too,
Oh, I remember the
particularly.
chap. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can't remember his name either, but
Yeah.
I remember him being on The Unexplained with Howard Hughes. Yeah,
Yeah, a few
yeah,
times, and it really is interesting case of that. Again, talk about window areas, and I'm a bit skeptical about that sometimes, because I think everywhere's a window, in my opinion. It's all bloody double glazing. The whole world is a window area. I think it just depends whether we're looking out the window or something comes through it.
yeah.
But
Fair enough.
yeah, but I am drawn to the concept too, because obviously coming from where I come from, there are traditions of where I've lived most of my life. There are traditions about some areas being more, stranger or thinner than others, when it comes to these things. Um,
Oh, what?
but
So some areas it's easier for
mm,
strange things to happen because it's thinner access
yeah,
for. Yeah,
past,
okay.
yeah, oh, yeah,
It's hard
yeah.
to put into words, but I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, you often have like kind of islands or out of the way places, mountainous areas or moors or coastlines possibly as well, and
Mm.
under examined aspect. But I do wonder if perhaps again we're just like that's where the reports are more common rather than perhaps it just being there. Rather, I mean, I'm a bit
So
always getting a bit
what?
skeptical.
So you mean that sort of what people in those areas are more likely to be open and honest
Mm.
about their experiences than other areas, but everywhere is having strange things happening all the
Yeah.
time. Is that what you mean?
Well, yeah, everything
Yeah.
everywhere at once kind of thing. I just
Yeah.
think of that as a potential alternative theory, because I'm a great contrarian. I kind of think, well, what's the opposite? I
Oh
don't
yeah,
necessarily
same
commit
here.
to that. Yeah, I don't really commit to it, but I think because history is so full of things being overturned and flipped over and
Mm,
then returned to. I do sometimes think whether that is because there's this whole racial idea as well. Being studying a lot of the history of Wales and the idea of the Celts being more
mm,
open to these experiences, being more able to see or experience them. Again, that's seriously problematic in many grounds as far as simplifying or generalizing, but it's something which many Celtic people actually enjoy and proud of.
okay.
Uh, that even in cases from the First World War, people were saying, "Oh, the Irish or any other Celtic are more likely to see ghosts or more likely to see things in the battlefield," and maybe that overlaps with Catholicism as well and a bit. But it's a very it, it definitely is something that's associated with primitive peoples, and of course in the Victorian times the Celts were seen as being more primitive
Right.
um, thing. So yeah, again, maybe more childlike, more open.
Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah. I don't know if this is a random question, but I'm aware of the stuff about banshees.
Mm.
but being quite am I right in saying that's quite a Celtic um,
Yeah, it's strongest
entity?
in Ireland. Yeah, yeah. Also
Yeah.
in Wales and yes, have like
You,
omens of death.
so there are banshees sighted in Wales as well, are there?
Types of the
Yeah.
term isn't used, but you have these omens of death, which can be the wailing figure, woman, can be something else, can be a dog. You know, the old black dog thing again.
Oh,
So these portents of death are quite common. Yeah, and also the superstitions, it comes into that, which is interesting as well, like a bird in the house. And again,
mm,
going back to my grandmother, I never forget when I was staying in their farmhouse once, a bird came in the house and it was just like the end of the world. And I was thinking,
really?
oh, is it because of the poor bird? No, it's because
Yeah.
so somebody's going to die. I was thinking as a kid,
Wow.
that's a bit weird. I mean, it's wanted the bird to get out, poor thing. But I think she's like,
Obviously, I have to ask, did someone die?
do you know what? Now you mention it, I can't say for sure
Okay.
because I was so young. Again, I was about
Yeah.
5, 6. My grandfather had died, so maybe
Okay.
again it was the reminder of a past death that might have been causing. He hadn't
Yeah.
died that long ago, so again here
Oh,
we go into how the supernatural or superstition
oh,
interacts with people's lives. But that might have
yeah.
upset my grandmother quite a bit.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm interested in when you mentioned black dogs as well. It's so interesting to me. Is I don't recall ever really hearing about banshees in England, but
Mm,
there's a lot of stuff about black dogs.
mhm.
But then obviously black dogs are a big deal all over the British Isles, whereas banshees aren't. But they're both portents for death or a bad situation to happen, aren't they? I don't know what I'm trying to say there, but I find that very fascinating how certain things spread and certain things don't, etc., etc.
Yeah, yeah. Some things just seem to get locked in to the folklore a bit more
Mm,
thoroughly than others, or they might be more acceptable than others are, or the trends and what families tell each other, I suppose too. That must be important.
yeah.
But yeah, I got to tell you this bizarre. Talking about experiences as well.
Mm,
I thought I saw something strange once years ago. That was a dog. Only strange because it looked like a large greyhound, like a lurcher, really. But it was about 6:30 in the morning, and it's quite a distance away from me. And this was in the early 90s, and I was jogging along this route and jogging back again, and I stopped within a few meters of this place because I saw it crossing a crossroads,
oh right.
and I wasn't a great, that at that stage I wasn't terribly into anything. I didn't think it was. I was just frightened of it attacking me because it was really tall, and very. It looked like it could be fast as well. So I just didn't want. I wasn't going that fast.
Yeah, fair enough.
I was crossing, and that was strange too. At that stage, again, it was probably a dog, which is more reason to be frightened of it because no one around either at
Yeah,
that time in the morning. But it's,
yeah.
I didn't think of it as a death omen or anything. But
No.
crossing the crossroads, I should have been thinking along those lines.
Oh, I see. Yeah, yeah. You got a couple
Uh,
of things there. Yeah, goodness.
yeah, how it fits on, So it's weird how these experiences kind of like just like the more you think about them, the more you find, which is again another thing I caution myself about because I can look into things and you can end up finding more things, which is might tell you more, but also perhaps I'm just loading things onto something which may not be that applicable. It's a dangerous game, this. It's like Jenga.
Yeah, yeah. I see what you mean. Yeah, definitely. Do you find that? Obviously, I'm not expecting you to divulge any personal information, but do you find that when people find out or are aware of what you do, that it
Mm.
makes them more inclined to confide in you certain experiences, strange experiences they might have had, or stuff that
Oh.
they wouldn't necessarily want to tell everyone? Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
Yeah.
It's yeah, I would have expected more students to come forth with the module. One or two have. It hasn't
Yeah.
been as common as I expected. Maybe
Oh.
it's the situation that I'm in, as their tutor.
Hmm.
Otherwise, I try to get things out of people subtly, and it doesn't work. And even when I hope them. I think there is more reticence out there than I expected to talk about these things. I
Really?
believed seriously that maybe we'd kind of crossed a few boundaries over the past 30 years plus.
Hmm.
Um, but I still think there's a real reluctance to say something about experiences
Oh
out
dear. It's a
there.
shame, isn't it, really?
Oh, this is
Mm.
where your podcast helps because to get some more out there,
Mm.
it's important. because it's a catalogue that is just never going to be filled, but we've got to start filling it with more and more accounts.
Oh yeah, I agree. Yeah, I've got a couple of people lined up in the coming months that are coming on to talk about experiences rather than being specialists in their field as well. So I'm trying to balance it out between the two. Um,
Yeah,
but as I say,
absolutely.
yeah, people are quite reticent to share these things. I think a lot of people are worried about being laughed at, which is awful, really. But that's why
That
when I
is a
put the advert out, I made sure I said in big letters, "It's important you understand.
Mm,
Um, I'm not going to take the mick or something like that. You know what I mean? I'm genuinely
yeah.
interested. You know, things like that."
Yeah. It's like what you said in one of your previous podcasts about the alcohol thing. I mean,
Mm,
that comes up time and time again with the sea serpents I've been looking at. The issue
mm.
it's always a joke, but it's okay, but it's also absurd because, I make no bones about this. I've drank a lot and I've never,
Same
it
here.
hasn't
Yeah.
really helped me. Hasn't really helped me. And even if other things, it hasn't really helped me necessarily
Mm,
to experience maybe as much as you'd expect.
mm,
And there's the laughter and there's the mockery and it's things, yeah, it's attached to you, isn't it? And it
mm.
becomes you then, rather than just being part of you as a complicated whole person. I think people are
Yeah.
frightened of being reduced to just being one thing or the other. If you look at
Yeah.
the letters that are sent to the Air Force in the 1960s with UFO sightings, you look at those
Mm.
and people always, my friends think I'm mad, and these comments there in the letters that were sent to them just so reveal it of how much goes on.
Oh yeah.
Social judgment. Yeah.
Yeah. Terrible. Yeah. Well, I'm not gonna keep you much longer. I'm gonna wrap it up in a minute. But thank you ever so much for coming on and telling us about yourself and etc. etc. If people want to watch or view anything that any of your work, where would you send them? Is there anywhere they can find you online,
Um,
etc.?
Pleasure, Kit. Thank you very much for having me on. I suppose the Association for the Study of ASAP,
Yeah.
Association for Scientific Study of Anomalous Phenomena. I've got a couple of things up there.
Okay.
I've got my own website, university website, which doesn't really take you anywhere, but it gives a list of what I've written, not all of it to do with this theme, of course. Um, and of course, they can get in touch with me if they want to via the email at that university website. I'm quite easy to find. There's not many people in my surname, the weird
Yeah.
mixture of as it is. Yeah, they can get in touch there if any queries.
That's brilliant. Thank you ever so much, Mike. And maybe I'll have you back again in the future to talk about more specific cases and such
Oh,
like, if
that'd
that's
be a
all right with you.
pleasure. Yes. Yeah, I definitely got something together that we might be interested in looking in
All
down the
right.
line for
Brilliant.
Haunted Magazine. We can talk about afterwards. Yeah. All the best, Kit.
Fantastic. Mike, brilliant. Thank you for your time.
Take care and all the best for the podcast.
Thank you, mate.